Welcome to Forgotten Civilization, where we uncover the hidden chapters of humanity's past. Stories buried in time, waiting to be rediscovered. In this episode, we journey into the heart of ancient America, tracing the rise, brilliance, and mystery of the Mound Builders, the lost architects of the Mississippi. Our story begins thousands of years ago, in an age before history was written, when the Mississippi River flowed through forests teeming with life, and when the people who lived here began to shape the land itself into monuments of meaning and power. These were not random heaps of soil. They were temples, observatories, and tombs, each carrying the weight of ceremony, spirituality, and social order. Here, across fertile valleys and rolling hills, an ancient world began to rise, one that would shape the destiny of a continent long before the arrival of Columbus. The story of the Mound Builders begins deep in prehistory, more than 5,000 years ago, long before the rise of cities like Rome or Athens, even before the pyramids of Egypt reached the skies. In the heartlands of North America, along the banks of mighty rivers like the Mississippi, Ohio, and Tennessee, small bands of hunter-gatherers began to transform their way of life. The land around them was rich, forests filled with deer and bison, rivers abundant with fish, and fertile soil perfect for cultivation. Slowly, these early peoples began to settle, to plant, and to shape their environment. From these humble beginnings emerged something extraordinary, a new kind of society that would build the first monumental structures of the continent. Archaeologists trace the origins of this transformation to what is now known as the Archaic period, around 3500 BCE. The earliest known mound in North America, called Watson Break, stands in modern-day Louisiana. At first glance, it looks like a natural rise in the land, but when seen from above, a pattern emerges, a circular arrangement of earthen mounds connected by ridges. Long before Stonehenge or the Great Pyramid, these people were shaping earth on a massive scale. They had no metal tools, no draft animals, and yet they built with precision, moving thousands of tons of soil with baskets and bare hands. This was not the work of a few individuals. It was the effort of a coordinated, organized community. It suggests something powerful: leadership, shared belief, and purpose. Over the centuries, the mound-building tradition spread across the continent. The earliest mound builders, often called the Adena culture, emerged around 1000 BCE in the Ohio Valley. They were skilled artisans, known for their intricate stone pipes, copper jewelry, and carved effigies. Their mounds often contained burials of high-ranking individuals, accompanied by precious goods, symbols of status and spiritual reverence. The Adena were among the first to see the landscape itself as sacred, reshaping it into forms that connected the earth to the heavens. Each mound was both a grave and a message, a monument to the dead and a symbol of continuity for the living. From the Adena, the tradition evolved into the Hopewell culture, around 200 BCE to 500 CE. The Hopewell people expanded the scale of mound construction to unprecedented levels. They built geometric earthworks, circles, squares, octagons, some spanning hundreds of acres with astonishing mathematical precision. These designs were aligned with celestial events, such as solstices and lunar standstills, revealing a deep understanding of astronomy. The Hopewell traded over vast distances, connecting what is now Florida, the Great Lakes, the Rocky Mountains, and even the Gulf of Mexico. Archaeologists have found obsidian from Yellowstone, copper from Michigan, and shells from the Gulf Coast buried in Ohio, all testifying to a vast network of exchange and communication. This was not an isolated culture. It was a civilization that understood the vastness of its world and engaged with it. The sophistication of the Hopewell earthworks challenges many assumptions about pre-Columbian North America. For centuries, early European settlers refused to believe that indigenous peoples could have created such monumental architecture. They attributed the mounds to lost tribes, ancient Atlanteans, or biblical wanderers. But modern archaeology has revealed the truth. The mound builders were Native American ancestors, innovators, astronomers, and artists whose cultural memory stretched across millennia. As time moved forward, new centers of mound building rose and fell. Around 800 CE, a new civilization emerged along the Mississippi River near modern-day St. Louis, Cahokia. This would become the greatest city of the Mound Builders, a metropolis of more than 20,000 inhabitants at its height. But before Cahokia, there were countless others, villages and ceremonial centers spread across the Midwest and South, each contributing to the tapestry of the mound builder tradition. The people who lived here organized their societies around the rhythms of nature, the flooding of rivers, the cycle of the sun and moon, and the change of seasons. Their lives were guided by a worldview that saw no division between the sacred and the everyday. The mounds themselves were not just places of burial or worship. They were symbols of stability, points of connection between the human and the divine. When communities gathered to build a mound, they participated in an act of unity and creation. Each basket of soil placed on the growing structure represented faith, effort, and memory. Over generations, as one mound was completed, another would rise nearby, creating landscapes of sacred architecture that marked the identity of entire regions. The mound builders' achievements reveal an understanding of community, geometry, and cosmology rarely acknowledged in Western narratives. The precision with which they aligned their structures to the movements of the sun and moon speaks of observation spanning centuries. To track celestial patterns requires patience and continuity, proof that their knowledge was recorded, taught, and inherited. Yet, their wisdom was not written in books or carved on stone tablets. It was encoded in the very earth beneath their feet. By the time Europeans first set foot in North America, many of these mound centers had already been abandoned for centuries. The reasons remain a mystery. Climate change, shifting trade networks, or disease may have played a part. But even as the cities fell silent, their legacy endured. The descendants of the mound builders, the ancestors of many modern Native American tribes, carried their stories through oral traditions. These stories spoke of sacred hills, of ancestors who lived in harmony with the rivers, and of builders who shaped the world with their hands. And so, as archaeologists dig deeper into the soils of the Mississippi Valley, they uncover not only artifacts, but echoes of a civilization that once thrived with science, spirituality, and purpose. The mound builders were not primitive, they were profound. They mapped the stars, commanded the landscape, and left behind monuments that defy time itself. Beneath the tranquil forests and rolling river valleys of the Ohio River Basin lies a forgotten story, one written not in stone, but in earth itself. Here, thousands of years ago, two civilizations emerged from the mists of prehistory to shape a continent's earliest architecture, the Adena and the Hopewell. They were not kings or conquerors in the classical sense, but master planners, astronomers, and artisans who built with purpose and precision that defies modern understanding. The Adena culture, flourishing between 1000 BCE and 200 BCE, was among the first to raise great burial mounds from the soil of the American Midwest. Their constructions were humble at first, simple conical mounds built to honor the dead. But as generations passed, the Adena transformed these burial sites into ceremonial centers, places where the living communed with ancestors and the cosmos alike. Within these mounds, archaeologists have found intricate grave goods, copper bracelets, carved effigies, and pipes fashioned into the forms of birds and animals, symbols of a belief system that bound earth, sky, and spirit together in a single sacred circle. Yet the Adena were only the beginning. Around 200 BCE, their traditions evolved into something even grander, the Hopewell culture, a civilization that would stretch its influence across thousands of miles. The Hopewell were traders and visionaries. They crafted jewelry from Gulf Coast shells, obsidian from the Rocky Mountains, and mica from the Appalachian peaks. Every artifact tells of an interconnected world, a vast network of exchange and ritual, long before the first European ship ever sighted these shores. Their earthworks were more than mounds. They were geometric masterpieces on a continental scale. In places like Newark, Ohio, the Hopewell designed vast ceremonial complexes, circles, octagons, and squares aligned perfectly to the lunar cycle. These were not the random works of a primitive society. They were celestial observatories built to mirror the heavens. Each mound's orientation carried meaning, guiding ceremonies that marked solstices, equinoxes, and the eternal rhythms of the moon. Standing at these sites today, one can still feel the mathematical genius encoded in the soil. Archaeologists using aerial drones and LiDAR imaging have revealed patterns invisible from the ground. Perfect symmetries spanning hundreds of acres, laid out with a precision that rivals the great works of Stonehenge or the pyramids of Giza. Who were the architects of these earthworks? How did they achieve such feats without the aid of metal tools, beasts of burden, or written plans? The mystery remains unsolved. The Hopewell were also spiritual innovators. Their mounds were not merely tombs, but gateways, symbolic portals between the physical and spiritual worlds. Burial chambers were arranged to follow cosmological patterns, reflecting a belief that death was not an end, but a transformation. In their art, we find a fascination with flight, transformation, and balance. Birds in motion, serpents winding toward the sky, and abstract designs echoing the constellations above. These symbols spoke of a worldview in which humanity was an integral part of nature's grand design. But as with all great civilizations, the Hopewell's age of harmony and artistry faded. Around 500 CE, their earthworks were abandoned. The reasons remain a subject of intense debate. Perhaps climate change, internal conflict, or shifting trade routes led to their decline. Yet their legacy endured. The Mississippian cultures that followed, including Cahokia, inherited their earth-moving techniques, their ceremonial traditions, and perhaps even fragments of their cosmology. Today, the Adena and Hopewell earthworks still rise silently from the landscape, reminders of an ancient America that few know existed. Some have been reclaimed by forest, others, like Serpent Mound, remain as haunting testaments to the vision of their builders. The great serpent still coils across the Ohio hills, its sinuous form aligned with the setting sun on the summer solstice. It is a masterpiece of landscape design and mythic storytelling. Its purpose still debated, but its beauty undeniable. In their silence, the mounds remind us that the human desire to build, to connect, and to understand the cosmos is universal. Long before the skyscrapers of New York or the temples of Egypt, people here, in the heart of ancient America, shaped the earth itself into living symbols of their place in the universe. The mound builders were not forgotten peoples. They were the original architects of a spiritual and scientific legacy that shaped an entire continent. Their monuments still whisper through the soil. We were here, we built, we believed. And though time has buried our names, our vision endures. Across the heartlands of North America, from the banks of the Mississippi to the valleys of Ohio, the great earthen monuments of the mound builders stood in solemn silence, untouched, unexplained, and almost forgotten. By the time the first Europeans set foot on the continent, these vast earthworks had already fallen silent. Their builders long vanished into the folds of prehistory. What happened to them? What unseen force erased a civilization capable of sculpting landscapes with astronomical precision and a profound understanding of nature? To understand the disappearance of the mound builders, we must first imagine the world they lived in at its height, a vast and connected realm of trade, ceremony, and cosmic wonder. For centuries, the Adena, Hopewell, and Mississippian peoples flourished. Their societies were not isolated tribes, but part of a continental tapestry. Copper from the Great Lakes, seashells from the Gulf of Mexico, and obsidian from the Rocky Mountains all flowed along ancient trade routes, linking distant peoples through shared ritual and exchange. Their mounds rose like beacons across the plains, each one a sacred anchor connecting heaven and earth. But somewhere around 1300 CE, this world began to unravel. The skies changed, and so did the earth. Scientists now know that a period of climate instability, known as the Little Ice Age, swept across the northern hemisphere. Crops failed, winters grew longer, summers shorter. Floods and droughts alternated unpredictably. For a people whose survival and rituals depended on the reliable cycles of the seasons, this chaos may have struck at the very core of their world order. Food shortages strained communities that had grown large and dependent on centralized farming and trade. Great cities like Cahokia, once home to tens of thousands, began to empty. Mounds that once hosted festivals and celestial rituals fell quiet. The once glorious Mississippian network began to fragment into smaller chiefdoms, each struggling to adapt, to survive. to understand what the gods had taken away. And yet, the mystery of their disappearance is not just a story of environmental collapse. There are deeper layers: social, spiritual, and even psychological. Archaeological evidence shows signs of conflict, palisades built around cities, signs of warfare, and population shifts. The harmony that once defined these mound-building cultures may have given way to competition, tension, and fear. Perhaps rival leaders fought for control of trade and spiritual authority. Perhaps old alliances broke apart as resources dwindled. What had once been a culture united by shared beliefs became scattered fragments, echoes of a once great tradition fading into memory. When European explorers and settlers arrived centuries later, they encountered these mounds rising mysteriously from the earth. To them, these structures were too monumental to have been built by the native peoples they met. And so began one of the most damaging myths in American history: the idea of a lost race of mound builders. Early colonists and scholars speculated wildly about their origins. Some claimed they were built by the 10 lost tribes of Israel. Others proposed Phoenicians, Vikings, or even a vanished civilization from Atlantis. These fantasies ignored the truth, that the ancestors of the indigenous nations of North America were the true architects of these marvels. For generations, this myth was used to deny Native Americans their heritage, to justify the taking of their lands by arguing that they were not the original builders. The mounds were treated as relics of an extinct race, a convenient fiction that erased living cultures. It wasn't until the 19th and 20th centuries that archaeology began to restore the truth. Excavations revealed artifacts unmistakably linked to the ancestors of modern native tribes. The style, materials, and burial customs aligned perfectly with indigenous traditions. Slowly, the narrative shifted, from one of mystery and denial to one of rediscovery and respect. Still, questions linger. Why did the mound builders choose to construct with earth rather than stone? Why did their cities, so carefully aligned to the heavens, ultimately fall into ruin? Some archaeologists suggest that the very nature of their architecture, built of the earth, designed to merge with nature, reflects a worldview fundamentally different from the civilizations of Europe or the Middle East. Their monuments were not meant to defy nature, but to embody it. In that sense, their disappearance was not a collapse, but a transformation. Their descendants carried their knowledge forward in oral traditions, art, and ceremony, even as their great cities faded into forest. Modern indigenous nations, including the Choctaw, Creek, Cherokee, and others, recognize these mounds as part of their ancestral legacy. To them, these are not ruins of a lost race, but sacred landscapes, living memories of their forebears. Ceremonies are still held at places like Moundville and Etowah, where the connection between past and present remains unbroken. The spirits of the builders, they say, are still here, watching, guiding, remembering. And yet, even with modern science and satellite mapping, the full scope of their achievements continues to astonish. LiDAR surveys have revealed thousands of undiscovered mounds hidden beneath farmlands and forests, some stretching for miles in geometric patterns, invisible from the ground. The scale of organization required to build these structures, to move millions of tons of earth without metal tools or beasts of burden, speaks to a level of social coordination and knowledge that rivals the ancient civilizations of Egypt or Mesopotamia. Perhaps that is the enduring mystery of the mound builders, not how they vanished, but how they lived. Their disappearance from written history does not mean they are gone. Their spirit lives on in the landscape itself, in the rivers that still follow ancient trade paths, in the constellations that their ancestors once tracked, and in the descendants who still honor their legacy. Today, as archaeologists and indigenous communities work together to reclaim and protect these sacred sites, a new story is emerging, one of recognition and renewal. The mound builders were not a lost race, but a living chapter of human history that challenges how we define civilization itself. They remind us that greatness does not always rise in stone. Sometimes it grows from the very earth beneath our feet. In the quiet hours of dawn, when the mist drifts over the ancient mounds of the Mississippi Valley, one can still sense their presence. The hum of ancient prayers, the rhythm of drums that once echoed across the plains, the whisper of a people who built to honor the sky. Their monuments endure not as ruins, but as testaments to endurance, vision, and humanity's timeless desire to reach beyond the horizon, to connect the heavens and the earth, and to leave behind something that will outlast the ages. As the sun sets over the silent mounds that still rise from the American landscape, the whispers of the past linger in the wind. These ancient earthworks, crafted with vision, purpose, and faith, stand as solemn reminders of a civilization that shaped a continent long before written history. The mound builders may be gone, but their legacy remains etched in the soil, defying time and silence alike. Each mound tells a story of creation and destruction, of power and belief, of people who dreamed beyond their age. While much of their world has vanished beneath centuries of change, their spirit endures in every mound, in every artifact unearthed, and in the enduring mystery that calls us to look deeper into our shared past. For in the heart of America, beneath the grass and the river mist, lies not just earth, but memory. The memory of the lost architects of the Mississippi, the mound builders of North America. If you enjoyed uncovering the mysteries of lost civilizations in ancient America, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more journeys into the forgotten chapters of history. Hit the bell icon so you never miss an episode as we continue exploring the secrets buried beneath time itself. This is Forgotten Civilization, where the past comes alive, one story at a time.